André Rieu, the man who gave the waltz back to the world, stands as the Dutch maestro who boldly took classical music out of the elegant velvet concert halls and placed it beneath vast open skies, filling enormous stadiums across 6 continents with the powerful sound of violins soaring high above the roar of more than 100,000 enthusiastic voices. With his unmistakable signature white bow tie, his flowing cascade of silver curls, and a warm smile that seemed incapable of any irony, he created and built the most successful touring orchestra in history, known as the Johann Strauss Orchestra, transforming it into a global phenomenon that no music executive had ever dared to imagine before. At the height of his career, more than 2 million people each year paid to stand under the stars and experience deep emotion through his music, shedding tears not from sorrow but from something far rarer, a profound sense of recognition that beauty had finally arrived, and they had not missed their chance to feel it. But behind this celebrated and glamorous legacy lies a story that is quietly devastating. One that includes a childhood spent under the heavy shadow of his father's strict expectations. A long marriage tested to its limits by decades of relentless international touring. A body gradually worn down by thousands of performances over 40 years. And a personal grief so deep that even the immense warmth of massive crowds could never fully reach or heal it. The world has enthusiastically applauded his outward joy for many decades, yet very few people have stopped to truly ask what personal price he had to pay in order to keep smiling through it all. If the sound of André Rieu's violin has ever moved you deeply, whether inside a concert hall, through a film, or late at night via a screen when the world around you felt too quiet and empty, then leave a like as a sincere tribute to the man who refused to let beauty remain something reserved only for the privileged few. The beginning of this remarkable legend was marked not by freedom but by the crushing weight of a name he had not yet earned. André Léon Marie Nicolas Rieu was born on October 1st, 1949 in Maastricht, a historic city of cobblestone squares and medieval spires nestled at the southern tip of the Netherlands, where the borders of Belgium and Germany meet. Closely, like old neighbors, it was a city that carried music deep in its bones, with church bells marking the hours, military bands marching through the squares on feast days. And in the Rieu household, music was never merely a hobby or pastime, but served as the very oxygen they breathed every day. His father, who conducted the Maastricht Symphony Orchestra and held a position of great local prestige, was not a cruel man, but a highly precise one who believed in discipline the way a carpenter believes in the perfect right angle, applying the same controlled authority to his family as he did on the conductor's podium. André grew up as the 5th of 6 children in a household filled with ambition and high expectations where, from the moment he could hold the instrument, a violin was placed in his small hands at the age of 4, not as a loving gift, but as a serious assignment. He would later recall with measured honesty that his father never had to raise his voice because the heavy silence that followed any mistake served as punishment enough, and that cold, precise and total silence became one of the defining experiences of his entire childhood. School life brought its own particular set of challenges and cruelties because, at the Jesuit-run secondary school, André was constantly held to a much higher standard, simply because he carried his father's respected name, leaving almost no room for the normal mistakes that other boys were allowed. He was not yet a prodigy during long stretches of his adolescence, only a competent student and diligent violinist, a quiet boy who had not yet discovered the inner spark that would one day fill massive stadiums with emotion. What ultimately saved and propelled him forward was not raw talent alone, but a deep stubbornness, the same quality his father had tried to instill in him, now transformed into a determination to create something warmer and more accessible, than the rigid world of traditional symphony. Conducting, he left home to pursue further studies at the Liège Conservatory in Belgium, continued at the Royal Conservatory of Brussels, and finally returned to the Maastricht Conservatory, steadily accumulating degrees and technical skill in the careful, methodical manner his strict upbringing had taught him. By the time he reached his mid-20s, André had become a competent and respected concert violinist within Dutch classical music circles, yet he remained almost entirely invisible to the wider world and carried a dream so impractical that few around him had the courage to encourage it. In 1987, André made a bold decision that everyone around him viewed as eccentric, at best, and financially ruinous at worst, by founding his own full orchestra. Not a small chamber group, but an ensemble dedicated to waltzes, operetta overtures, and the joyful music of Johann Strauss and similar composers that the serious classical establishment had long dismissed as too popular and undemanding. The first performances took place in modest small venues across the Netherlands, such as church halls and community centers with basic acoustics, where the orchestra played beautifully but audiences remained sparse and critics offered only faint praise that felt like quiet dismissal. André absorbed those early setbacks the same way he had absorbed his father's silences as a boy, responding not with surrender, but with quiet and durable resolve. Determined to reach the ordinary people who had always felt excluded from classical music, the true turning point arrived gradually like a rising tide as the orchestra built its audience, concert by concert and city by city, through the late 1980s and early 1990s, with André developing the habit of walking into the crowd during performances, playing his violin among the people, conducting with laughter instead of severity, and inviting theatrical singers that brought new life to every show. By 1994, the Johann Strauss Orchestra was selling out theaters across the Netherlands, and by 1998, André stood on the stage of Maastricht's Vrijthof Square, conducting for tens of thousands of people who had traveled from across Europe, realizing in that moment that the music had always belonged to the audience and he was simply the one who had opened the door. What happened next defied every conventional rule the music's industry had long accepted as permanent as André and his orchestra expanded rapidly from a local curiosity into a true global institution with album sales, chart success, and concert revenues that shattered previous records for classical musicians. The orchestra grew from its original 12 members to a massive touring ensemble of over 140 performers, including musicians, singers, dancers, and a large production crew that traveled with military precision across 6 continents, complete with dozens of trucks carrying custom-built sets designed to turn arenas into 19th-century ballrooms. The demanding touring schedule took a heavy toll on his personal life, particularly his marriage to Marjorie, whom he had married in 1975 when the orchestra was still only a distant dream, as she worked tirelessly behind the scenes managing business affairs and raising their 2 sons, Pierre and Marc, largely during his long absences on the road. For 4 decades, André pushed his body to its limits by standing for hours on stage night after night, traveling constantly across time zones, and delivering full, passionate performances regardless of fatigue, until the accumulated physical strain began showing in chronic back pain, shoulder damage, knee problems, and vocal strain. Health warnings appeared as early as 2009 with episodes of severe exhaustion. Yet he continued performing through pain and adapted his technique, while quietly grappling with deeper anxiety about the eventual day when his body might no longer allow him to step onto the stage. In his late 60s, he began a gradual transformation, renegotiating his relationship with touring so he could spend more meaningful time at home in Maastricht with Marjorie, rediscovering the simple pleasures of being fully present with the woman who had supported his vision from the very beginning. Now in 2025, at the age of 75, André still walks onto the Friedhof stage every July with violin in hand and the same warm presence, though with a more human and balanced schedule that leaves room for family, rest, and reflection after decades of relentless motion. The empire he built continues to thrive under the capable stewardship of his sons, while his philanthropy focuses on opening doors for children to discover music, ensuring that the same opportunities once forced upon him as a boy are now offered as genuine choices to others. André Rieu did not merely democratize classical music, but reminded the entire world that this beauty had never truly belonged to institutions or elites in the first place, and had always been meant for anyone willing to stand under open skies and allow themselves to feel its power. His lasting legacy lives on not only in record sales, sold-out concerts, and broken records, but in the countless ordinary people across the globe who discovered through his music that they too were worthy of experiencing transcendent beauty.